This is Paperback Warrior, episode 18.
Welcome back to another episode of the Paperback Warrior. Again, this is the flagship paperbackwarrior.com official podcast. Feel free to visit us at paperbackwarrior.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and you can also listen to the show wherever popular streaming services are offered. Tom, what do we have on tap today?
Oh man, today's going to be a great episode. We're going to be doing a feature on the Matt Helm series by Donald Hamilton, and we're going to be doing reviews of... I'm going to be doing Mute Witness by Robert L. Fish, writing as Robert L. Pike, a book that you guys may know better as the basis of the movie Bullitt, starring Steve McQueen. And you've got a review of Death Squad #1 by Dan Striebe, or Dan Stribe. We don't know how to pronounce his name. But first, I'm looking at this beautiful stack of books you have in front of us. You've stumbled upon an interesting series, haven't you?
Yeah, really. I've got a series called The Mercenaries. There's a lot of series called Mercenary, or I Am the Mercenary, or Call Me Mercenary, or whatever it might be. But this one's, I got 3 installments of this series. It really piqued my curiosity. It was written by a popular crime fiction author named John Harvey under the house name of John Hart. John is Jon, if you want to do some research on your own. Many listeners may be familiar with Harvey's contributions to the 1970s Western series Apache. He also did Lawmen, and he did Hawk, among others. His most successful work, though, I believe, is the Charlie Resnick series of modern crime fiction, which I think launched in the late 80s and maybe is still ongoing. I don't know. But The Mercenaries features a guy named, Major Kane, who runs a team of mercs called 5 Commando. The book plots are probably endless, with most of the books dedicated to the war-torn places like South America, Africa, Southeast Asia of the time period. The series was published by Mayflower in the U.S., and I think Grenada in Australia. Justin Marriott, if you're listening, please keep me honest and fact-check that. Overall, there are 4 volumes to the series from what my research shows. I got Black Blood, Triangle of Death, and High Slaughter. But anyone familiar with this series, give us their thoughts. You can always email us at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. Again, this is the Mercenaries series by John Harvey under house name John Hart.
And just looking at these books, I know we have a lot of people who really enjoy beautiful cover art. This is some of the best cover art I've ever seen. This is just amazing, incredible action sequences depicted on this cover. Just really beautiful layout. This is an attractive-looking book.
Yeah, and in fact, it looks like there was another series that John Harvey wrote called Death Shop. Again, if anyone knows anything about that series, please let us know. But Death Shop looks like it features the same artist. It's really beautiful covers.
Yeah, I think this is a British series, just looking at their copyrights and the pricing structure and all that. Looks like it also had life in Australia and New Zealand as well, as far as publications there. But it remains a bit of a mystery to us. Have you read them yet?
No, but I want to.
Okay, all right, cool. All right, let's launch right into our feature, which is the Matt Helm series by Donald Hamilton. To me, one of the Holy Trinity, one of the best series ever written. Probably my favorite series of all time, if I had to decide. However, you will notice if you go into the Paperback Warrior blog site that there are not a whole lot of reviews of Matt Helm books by Donald Hamilton, because I read all these books kind of back to back to back before I started writing for Paperback Warrior. And so my goal today, in addition to selling you, the listener, on the idea of starting and reading this series, is to actually sell Eric here on the idea of reading and reviewing some books in this series, because this is not a series we should avoid or leave off. Donald Hamilton was born in 1916 in Sweden, and he immigrated to the U.S. at age 8. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. He died in 2006. He served for the U.S. during World War II and spent most of his adult life in the Santa Fe, New Mexico area where many of his books are based. He was a real avid outdoorsman and hunter. He had articles on knives in Knives magazine, and he actually wrote at least one nonfiction book on guns and hunting. He began writing in 1946, mostly short stories and novellas for magazines. But when paperback originals took over the market in the 1950s, Hamilton started writing standalone books like Assassins Have Starry Eyes, Line of Fire, both of which I think are rough drafts for the voice he used in the Matt Helm series. He also wrote 6 Western novels. I think at least one was reviewed by Eric on the site. But the Matt Helm series didn't really begin until 1960, when he wrote what he thought was going to be a standalone book called Death of a Citizen for Fawcett Gold Medal. In Death of a Citizen, we meet Matt Helm, a World War II veteran, but really more of a spy operative type guy in World War II. However, it's now 1960. He's retired with his family in New Mexico, and he's a mid-list writer of Western novels. So Matt Helm's an author, living in New Mexico with his wife and kids, his knives and his rifles. I think really, if you look into it, Donald Hamilton basically made himself into a fictional character, because at that point in time, Donald Hamilton was a guy living with his family in New Mexico, writing Western novels that, were selling well, but not really catching the world on fire. In Death of a Citizen, Matt Helm sees a woman at a cocktail party that he knew during the war. And then from that interaction, we learn more about his war service. And it turns out he wasn't just a normal soldier or a spy. He was an assassin working for a shadowy corner of the U.S. government for a guy named Mac, who ran an agency without a name. And so through the events that occur in Death of a Citizen, Matt Helm gets sucked back into the life of this of an assassin with this no-name agency run by this guy named Mac. And I'm not spoiling anything to say that the Death of a Citizen, the citizen in that title, is Matt Helm himself. He was a normal citizen, and then the circumstances of that book really kill him off as a citizen and drag him back into the life of being a professional assassin. The entire series is first-person narration. Matt Helm is a logical and reasonable man who's forced to deal with emotional and unreasonable people throughout the series, and that's one of my favorite aspects. Death of a Citizen was a monster hit. And so Fawcett Gold Medal and Donald Hamilton, to a company and a person who are definitely no fools, realized that this thing could be a series. And so he began writing a Matt Helm book every few months, and it was until we hit 27 books in the series going through 1993. Basically, he's a government assassin who got thrust into the world of espionage. The first 10 books in the series were absolutely golden, some of the best men's adventure fiction I've ever read in my life. And then the series went downhill after that, I would say. There was a maritime phase which started around book 10, which coincided with Donald Hamilton beginning to live on a yacht himself. The series, as people will tell you that they can be read out of order, I disagree. The series is not numbered, but the books in the series, I think, are best read in order because there's characters who reoccur and villains who come and go, and the bureaucracy behind Mac's agency is sort of a subplot throughout the whole thing. The series, eventually he found his groove as far as naming the books, and they had names like The Removers, The Silencers, The Ambushers, The Shadowers. You get the idea. By the time the 1980s roll around, sales were deteriorating as the espionage fiction market really shifted to the Tom Clancy-style techno-thrillers. And as a result, it's way easier to find the early books in the series, the thin Fawcett Gold Medal ones, and much harder to find the 300-page Donald Hamilton last few Matt Helm books. Probably because, and I was working in bookstores in the 80s, a lot of those books didn't sell and they were stripped, which means that the covers were torn off by the bookstores, the book was thrown in the garbage, and the cover was returned to the publisher for money back. They're still in print, and they're also available as ebooks. They're not hard to get your hands on. The one thing I want to point out is that I think the first dozen or so, maybe not even that, maybe just the first 8, were released as audiobooks by this amazing audiobook performer, reader, actor, I don't know what the proper word is, a guy named Stefan Rudnicki, who also did the audiobooks for the Quarry books, which another one of my favorite series, and it's really interesting to hear. I associate his voice in my mind as I read the Matt Helm books. An interesting little factoid is that there was in 2002, right before his death, Donald Hamilton wrote a Matt Helm book, the last Matt Helm book, called The Dominators, which was never published. He couldn't find a publisher for it, and his estate is sitting on this book. There's a lot of big fans of the Matt Helm series who would love to see The Dominators released based on the idea that it's some kind of great book. But my experience with unreleased books is that there was generally a good reason why they were unreleased. And there's no reason to believe, in my mind, that The Dominators is anything good or special, because by that point the series had really run out of steam creatively. I need to address the movies. There were 4 Matt Helm movies starring Dean Martin. I was such a huge Matt Helm fan, I made the mistake of watching one of them, and they're just terrible. They bear no resemblance whatsoever to the books. They're really Austin Powers style farces making fun of the spy genre. They're incredibly stupid, and I beg you, if you care at all about this series, don't even delve into the movies. Interestingly enough, the Matt Helm books and Matt Helm movies have gotten a little bit of attention lately because the Wrecking Crew, which was a Matt Helm book that was made into a movie with Dean Martin, it was a dumb movie, but it also starred Sharon Tate, who was killed by the Manson family. And in the Quentin Tarantino movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Sharon Tate character actually goes into a movie theater to watch a Matt Helm movie with her in it, The Wrecking Crew, to see how the crowd reacts to her. DreamWorks optioned the film rights in 2002 to the Matt Helm books to make them into an actual book series, and but it ended up going nowhere. My favorite books in the series, I think Death of a Citizen, the first one is great. The Wrecking Crew, which is the second one. And then there's one in the middle called The Shadowers. Those are my 3 favorites. But I really feel this is a series, if you want to read the first 8 to 10 books in order, they're going to be your favorites. Donald Hamilton died in his sleep in 2006 at age 90. There are 155 boxes of his papers with his original manuscripts at UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles, including the Dominator. So if you wanted to spend a week at a university library with those books, you could probably check it out and sit there in the library going through his original papers and read an early draft of the Dominators if you were that interested in doing it. I don't know of anyone who's actually done that. There's an excellent fan website called matthelmbooks.com, which I use because I always need to figure out what book is next in the series because for some reason they were always unnumbered. Anyway, so that's my wrap on the Matt Helm series. If you enjoy the type of books that we talk about in this podcast, I can pretty much guarantee that you're going to love the first 8 books in the Matt Helm series. And if Eric decides to not try and read these books, I'm going to go back and reread them to get these reviews there because our thoughts on these books, the world needs to see them.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I haven't even started reading that series, and I've even borrowed the first book from Tom, I think I'm just intimidated to read it because it gets so many great reviews and it's held in such high regard. I'm kind of intimidated to get my thoughts on it, but I'll give it a try. In fact, you wrote a review for In the Line of Fire, and I actually read that book after I read your review and absolutely loved it. So if it's in that vein, then I'm probably going to fall in love with it.
Yeah, I really think In the Line of Fire was a rough draft for the Matt Helm books, and the voice he uses, that kind of main character, really could have been Matt Helm, especially as kind of didactic as he got involving rifles and different type of rifles and different type of loads. It's not the gun porn you see in the Mac Bolan books, which I think is just sort of, I don't know, it's a bit show-offy for me at times. It's really just truly someone who loves riflery and who gets into it, but it's never overblown.
Yeah, I think if you're a fan of Stephen Hunter, you'd probably really like to go back and read that book because it's got a lot of the things that Stephen Hunter uses in his Jack Swagger book, or Bob Lee Swagger, I should say. Anyway, we're talking about the top echelon of fiction. We're going to go to the bottom now because I've got a review for Death Squad #1, Gang War, by Dan Strebe. I'm going to say Strebe because I just don't know any difference. And last week I promised you that I would provide some proof that Dan Strebe has a weird fetish. Last week we reviewed Brannon, which was a 1973 book that Strebe wrote. Death Squad #1, Gang War, was written in 1975. It's a 2-book series. I don't know if you can call 2 books a series, but it was 2 books under the Death Squad name. It was published by Belmont Tower, and it's under the house name of Frank Coulter. And, you know, it's weird, and I'm going to give credit to the Glorious Trash blog, which is a fantastic resource. It has a similar outline to the 1975 5-volume series called Kill Squad, which was also written by Mark Strebe as Mark Cruz. But the premise of Death Squad it's a familiar one. We've got 3 cops who take to the streets to fight crime without a uniform. And, you know, the idea is that they can accomplish far more by spending their own personal time and fortunes on fighting crime than the pension benefit-loaded daytime gig. Thus, the debut Gang War comes to fruition. The novel's set in San Diego. And it's got an opening scene that's a little bit graphic with a 15-year-old girl being raped by a trio of young men. Officers Paul Scott and protagonist Mike Sanders arrive on the scene, and I'm going to say Mike or Mark because he changes the first name of this character all through the book. I don't know what he's deciding to do, Mike or Mark. Arrives on the scene just in time for Scott to be shot in the scrotum. And I'm going to go back to Brannon last week. If you haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to that. It's a great plantation novel feature in that episode. But in Brannon, it features a man who has his penis cut off by a group of bad guys. So right off the bat, Strebe has this officer being shot in the scrotum. We're going to get some more of that in here in just a moment. But once this happens, these two officers, Sam Durham and Rael Gomez, decide that they're going to form a trio. And instead of taking a week off, they're going to dip into their sick leave bank and go into action as a three-man vigilante team. So they slowly start putting together the pieces on how the rape scene happened. They find out some information about the girl, and they find this pin on the girl. And the pin is a fancy yacht club pin that apparently the rapist was wearing. So Sanders knows the location. Once there, he stumbles on this high society group of young Berkeley kids who are all members of this violent union entitled Terrorist Liberation Army. But a lot of the middle chapters feature Sanders and Durham on a boat chase off the coast tracking the rapist, and then getting reprimanded by their superiors back at the station. I'm not going to delve too much into the twists and turns of the story, only that the pre-finale is one of the greatest of all time. Hint, I'm not going to ruin it for you. It's a firefight in the San Diego Zoo among tourists and animals. And that's right, animals. So if you thought the Dead Alive lawnmower scene was really cool, wait until you read this. It's crazy. But the strange part about this thing, and I'm going to go back to this now, is that the author has this weird fetish with mutilating genitalia. So get this. We have the opening scene where the guy's shot in the scrotum. Another scene, I'm not making this up, a woman is shot point blank in the vagina.
Jesus.
And then there's another scene where a woman is shot. She has her breast shot off.
Stop the madness.
So I don't know what the fascination is with the fatchy areas, but Dan Strebe has a hard-on for this stuff, and I don't know if he failed vasectomy school or if he's got some kind of weird thing going on.
He's giving the people what they want, Eric.
I guess. Anyway, this isn't surprisingly this isn't Hall of Shame material. It's okay. It was just average, I think. If you listened to a couple weeks ago, I mentioned the same thing about The Specialist #1 by John Shirley. It's just average. It's not terrible. I'll probably read the second novel just for giggles. But again, it's Death Squad #1 Gang War by Dan Strebe, writing as Frank Coulter. And if anyone has read, I want to say this, if anyone's read the Hawk series by Dan Strebe, which is universally panned worldwide, let me know if there's more genitalia mutilation, because I'm curious what the deal is with this guy, and if he features more of it in other books.
I read one of the Hawk books, and one involving, I thought it would be kind of cool because it involved the president and the first lady, and the first lady was like hot and horny and wanted to get with Hawk, but it was just dreadful. I don't think I made it through the whole book, or even probably made it through the first half, but I remember it being one of the worst books I ever read, and I was so furious because the covers are so beautiful to that series. So that guy is on double secret probation with me. I can't imagine going back and revisiting his work. Yeah,
he's really a deadpan author. There's really not a lot of life to his narrative. He's just meat and potatoes.
Yet we keep covering him.
Yeah, two back-to-back that we've dedicated to this guy.
It's an entire podcast devoted to this no talent. All right, so let's switch gears. That again, that was Eric's review of the Dan Strebe novel, writing as Frank Coulter. I'm going to be reviewing a book called Mute Witness by Robert L. Fish, but he wrote the book under the name Robert L. Pike because Pike is a fish. It is the first book in the Lieutenant Clancy series, and a little bit about this is that Robert Lloyd Fish, who lived from 1912 to 1981, he was an Edgar Award-winning mystery author who wrote about 30 crime novels under his own name, and then a few novels under the Robert Pike name. So this 1962 paperback Mute Witness that we're talking about today was loosely adapted into the 1968 Steve McQueen film Bullitt that I haven't seen, and we'll talk about that later because you're going to jump me on that. I understand that the film is iconically set in San Francisco, and it's got this great car chase scene that people who are into car chase scenes who think that no other car chase scene has ever been filmed, and the cars shoot sparks as they leap over the hills, blah, blah, blah. I have to tell you, all that was just Hollywood. Mute Witness is a car chase-free mystery novel set in beautiful New York City. Specifically the 52nd Precinct, where New York Police Department Lieutenant Clancy, who has no first name, who later became Bullitt in the movie, is assigned to guard a witness who's going to be testifying before the State Crime Commission. The DA wants this witness alive when the commission meets, but the Mafia wants this witness permanently muted. Again, the title's Mute Witness, so you know what everyone's looking to have happen. So the witness himself is a guy named Johnny Rossi. He's a high-level hoodlum running a regional crime racket. He's going to be spilling his guts to the New York Crime Commission. He's hidden in a small uptown hotel, and Lieutenant Clancy and his guys need to protect him and make sure that he's alive long enough to testify. It doesn't spoil anything because it happens very early in the novel that someone tries to kill Rossi while he's being protected by Clancy's guys. Clancy needs to determine the source of the compromise, identify the syndicate assassins hired to do the job. It's a real mystery novel. It's not just an action novel with actual clues and red herrings and a solvable solution. What was really cool about this novel is that the author creates a real sense of urgency because Clancy must solve this case before a certain deadline or everything's going to go to hell. And so an interesting element to the plot is that in order to solve this case in a hurry, Clancy forgoes sleep. His sleep deprivation creates physical exhaustion coupled with the decline in his mental faculties over the course of the paperback. And we've all been there when we're working really hard or studying hard in school and not getting much sleep. And Robert Fish, the author, does a fantastic job of making this exhaustion real for both Clancy and the reader. So Fish wrote a few other short stories in 3 novels in his Lieutenant Clancy series, all using the Robert Pike pseudonym. The first book, of course, was Mute Witness from 1962. The second book is called The Quarry from 1964. The third Lieutenant Clancy book is called Police Blotter from 1965. So by the time that Hollywood makes this movie Bullitt, that everyone seems to love, in 1968, Robert Fish was just basically finished with the Clancy character. The book was re-released under the name Bullitt. I think it became a bestseller at that point. My research indicates that Clancy and Bullitt have zero in common anyway. Hollywood just basically took the novel's basic plot outline, added some car chases, and moved it to San Francisco with essentially an entirely different lead character. But the film was a monster hit. And so what Fish did, because he's a working author and a guy needs to eat, is he writes a series of novels using the Pike pseudonym, starring a, get this, fast-driving, turtleneck-wearing San Francisco detective named Reardon. Bullitt fans who are looking for fans of this movie Bullitt who are looking for more of the same should probably not even bother with Mute Witness because it's not going to resemble the movie they love, and should probably just check out this Reardon novels. But if you are a fan of smart NYPD police procedurals in the vein of Ed McBain, you'll absolutely love the intelligent twists and turns in Mute Witness. It's a great book. The paperback's been reprinted a ton. It's still in print. It's an affordable ebook. You can find it under both the original title and the Bullitt movie tie-in. And I can't recommend this high enough.
So let me ask you, have you seen Bullitt?
I have not seen Bullitt, and I'm not going to see Bullitt. And here's why. One, I kind of know the punchline. I know the twists and turns because they stole the basic plot about the protection thing. 2, I don't really like old movies from that era. 3, anyone wants to talk about is the car chase. And here's my bold statement. I think that movies are an inferior art form to books. Think of all the books you've read and enjoyed that have been adapted into movies. Nearly all of the movies suck compared to the book. Why on earth do I want to go see an inferior version of this book that I enjoyed, where they basically changed all the stuff I really enjoyed about it? So I'm not interested in seeing Bullitt. I'll move on with my life. The hour and a half I could be spend reading Bullitt, I could probably read a Mac Bolan novel.
So you say you don't watch any old movies? Like, you don't watch any of the classics?
I have. I mean, historically, because I'm an old man. But at some point, they were just the movies that were on television. So, I look back at old movies. I like some of the Hitchcock movies. I liked Cool Hand Luke. I thought that was fantastic. It's one of my favorites. I like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. It's not a universal theme for me, but If I have a choice and I'm going to sit down and watch a movie for 2 hours, I'd rather watch a movie, whether it takes place in the olden days or not. I like new movies and old books. I couldn't imagine sitting through a 500-page techno thriller today, but I'll sit down and read an old, Trailsman book or a book from the 1950s. I just don't like old movies. It's not my thing. You like old movies?
Yeah, I watch some old movies, and it's weird because nowadays they're really hard to find. I mean, it's not like you can just pull up Netflix and find Humphrey Bogart or something. It's just hard to find unless you buy the Blu-ray, which some of those are really expensive. So let me ask you, we got a little bit of extra time talking about this old stuff, and this is an author that I've never read. Have you read Raymond Chandler?
My dad was really into Raymond Chandler, so we always had Raymond Chandler books around the house. I think I picked up The Big Sleep, and I got to tell you, I couldn't get into it. His writing was, for something about it, I just really didn't enjoy it. They weren't like hard boiled enough, but they were. I just didn't enjoy his prose, and so I'm a minority there because I know he's one of the the Holy Grail, and and Mickey Spillane probably never would have happened if it weren't for Raymond Chandler, and none of the books that we enjoy would have happened if it weren't for Mickey Spillane. But no, I'm not a Raymond Chandler fan, and every time I've tried to read his stuff, I just can't get through it. It's boring to me.
And you're not the biggest fan of Mickey Spillane, right?
I've had trouble connecting with Mickey Spillane. Some of the short fiction I've read by him I've enjoyed. I keep trying to read the Mickey Spillane, Mike Hammer novels, and I'm just not a fan. I understand that he's this great guy. He's iconic. I appreciate his place in history, but I have not been able to connect with his novels.
Yeah, I read I, the Jury, I think, which is the first Mike Hammer, and I have to say I really didn't enjoy it. In fact, I did a review out there on paperbackwarrior.com and got a little bit of abrasion from readers just because of my opinion of it, but it didn't do anything for me. Maybe at the time it would have had more impact, but looking back at it now, it didn't do much for me.
Yeah, I'm looking at your Mickey Spillane collection right now. I'm trying to remember the one that I read most recently in the series. It's the one that Stephen Merch says was the best. It starts out with Mickey Spillane being really depressed, walking across a bridge. It wasn't the first, and it wasn't one of the more recent ones. Here, let me take a look at your stack right there in your hand. It was One Lonely Night. I read One Lonely Night, and I was unable to connect to it. I recognize it was probably well written. It was really grim, so it had that kind of David Goodis feel. But ultimately, I couldn't get into it or his writing. And so, again, I'm willing to acknowledge that Raymond Chandler and Mickey Spillane are amazing writers, and nothing would be as good as it was if they didn't exist. It's just, arguing about someone's taste is like arguing in books is like arguing about someone's taste in dessert toppings. Some people are butterscotch people, some people aren't.
So I've got you on the spot here. I'm doing a little interview with Tom here.
None of this is planned, so that's why it's so awkward.
Yeah, it's awesome. What about the Second Coming, I guess, which was Dashiell Hammett?
Okay, now I'm a huge Dashiell Hammett fan. In fact, I was looking at I loved the Maltese Falcon was a great novel. I haven't read any of the other Sam Spade books, but my favorite character by him was the Continental Op, and I don't want to get into it too much because I want to do an entire feature on him, but he was the original nameless detective, and man, oh man, Dashiell Hammett could write his ass off, and he wrote circles around both Mickey Spillane and Raymond Chandler. Any day of the week, I would put him up against those guys. That guy's probably one of the most important authors ever. So yeah, I Dashiell Hammett's the real deal, and I do connect with his works even to this day.
Excellent. Well, that was fun. I guess that's really all we had for this episode. It's a little short, but hopefully you'll forgive us.
No, these people have other things to do than listen to us yammer.
Yeah, they're on their way to work.
Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for listening. We enjoyed that. Hope you did too. Have a great week. We appreciate you listening. Thank you so much.